North Korea and China recently celebrated the 65th anniversary of a friendship treaty, but relations between the two sides remain complicated. For more, we're joined today by Dr. Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So a senior North Korean official was recently in Beijing and he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping there. Where does the alliance between Pyongyang and Beijing stand today?
Yeah, I think it's the strongest it's been recently, right? There were some rocky areas of the relationship, and I think that this sort of reaffirms their commitment to each other. Right. First, you had President Xi visiting North Korea. Now you have the completement of that diplomatic exchange, and I think that shows China's commitment to North Korea and North Korea's commitment to China. At the same time, there's still underlying tensions, right? There's a fundamental difference between what China wants and what North Korea wants. Right? China wants stability above all. It views North Korea as a buffer zone between the U.S. backed South Korea and Japan and itself, and it wants to ensure stability in North Korea above all else, economic stability, political stability, because if the regime were to collapse, that would cause a flood of millions of refugees, right, into China, and would again dismantle that buffer. That strategic buffer. So, on the other hand, North Korea wants China's support diplomatically. It wants China to stand up for its interests in the United Nations, for example. And it hasn't always done that, right? China did give in to U.S. sanctions, or not U.S., UN sanctions on North Korea in the past. It's been a little bit more unwilling to do that as of late. And so for that, perhaps that shows that renewed commitment to North Korea. But it's going to be less ideological going forward. I think it's going to be more of a strategic partnership.
So in detail, how do you expect relations between North Korea and China to evolve over the next 65 years?
Yeah, 65 years it's a bit hard to predict that far into the future. But I think going forward, I think what we expect to see is a shift from a highly ideological, communist ideology, Marxist, right, this kind of thing, towards a more pragmatic, strategic relationship, in particular on the part of China, right? From China's perspective, it is formally communist, but functionally, its economy is capitalist. It doesn't have private markets, right? All of the trappings of a modern capitalist economy, whereas North Korea remains committed to the Marxist-Leninist ideology, Kim Il-sung ideology, right, of the past, sort of stuck in the Cold War, right? And so that's a pretty big difference. And so I expect it to be more pragmatic. I expect China to sort of, not particularly like North Korea's push to continue to present itself as a nuclear power. But it'll probably tolerate it so long as it is able to maintain stability, as I mentioned earlier, right? And so it'll continue to provide economic support, strategic support, and into the future, as far as I can tell. But I expect it to be much less ideological and combative, right? And more as a reflection of the broader dominance of the world, of the global economy.
And with so much conflict happening around the world, what lessons do you think North Korea is drawing from these recent wars, with the Ukraine war and the U.S. Iran conflict, particularly regarding modern warfare drones and advanced weapon systems?
Yeah, so I think the drones are good. Are one thing. I think the number one thing, though, is a lesson that it's already learned, which is that nuclear weapons are the ultimate insurance policy, right? Libya gave up its nuclear weapons. Gaddafi was overthrown. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1990. It's being attacked by Russia. And the list goes on, right? Iran, for example, doesn't have nuclear weapons. And so that, if Iran had nuclear weapons, the U.S. probably would not have attacked it, right? And so I think that's the number one takeaway, just to further strengthen their belief in the belief that nuclear weapons are paramount, right, in terms of regime survival, right, and deterring other nations from attacking. Drones, obviously, is the other big takeaway, right? You see the drone swarms overtaking super advanced military technology, missiles and tanks, blowing up tanks, hunting soldiers, providing, constant surveillance of troop movement, right? This is, but I think, I think we all sort of have seen the videos of the drones with the wires attached to them blowing up tanks and stuff like, so that's probably the other main thing. And then the third that is important for North Korea is that it demonstrates the importance of precision weapons, right? Using precision guided, like laser guided weapons or electronic guided weapons, versus just having a bunch of weapons, right? Having a lot of not so smart missiles is not like the best strategy in today's world. Artillery shells, right? Things like this. These are the weapons of the past, right? You need precision guided things, and that's sort of a strike against North Korea because it really relies on its massive stockpile of weapons, right? And so that's going to be something that's going to have to address, and it's going to be hard to do that because they don't have a modern economy, right? They don't have a lot of resources to work with. They have just a few partners, China, Russia. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to the changes in warfare.
Right, right. And Professor Jenkins, before I let you go, as for inter-Korean relations, it's been a little over a year since President Lee took office. So how would you assess President Lee's North Korea policy at this stage, and what would be the biggest challenge for the president in implementing his North Korea policy?
Yeah, so his official policy is the end policy, right? Engage, normalize, and denuclearize. And so the engage part, honestly, all three of those are very difficult. Like as compared to when Moon Jae-in was president, right? He had a much different environment. North Korea was at least a little bit willing to, a little bit, interested in dialogue and engaging. Now. Really, they have no interest. They have no incentive to engage with South Korea. They have Russia as an emerging partner, and North Korea is balancing Russia against China, and so they're going to be having a lot of support from these two powerful countries, and it's just difficult for Lee to get that engagement, and the normal at which and that without engagement you can't really have normalization, and then denuclearization. That's going to be, it's kind of off the table at this point, given that North Korea has changed its policy of viewing the two Koreas as one country, and just now is officially views South Korea as a foreign state and an enemy state. So it's going to be very tough to get the engagement going, I think, for President Lee.
Right. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Jenkins, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.